Imagine this one small act of kindness, a gesture most would overlook, a choice made in a heartbeat. For Sarah, a waitress drowning in debt and faded dreams, it was just another Tuesday. Or so she thought. She covered a destitute man's $20 bill, a sum she couldn't truly afford. What she didn't know was that this simple act of compassion was a test. A pebble dropped into the vast ocean of fate. And the ripple. It wasn't just a thank you. It was a gleaming Bentley, a mysterious note, and a revelation that would shatter her world and redefine her future forever. The aroma of stale coffee and sizzling bacon clung to Sarah like a second skin, a perfume she'd worn for the past 5 years working at Rosie's Diner. Rosie's, a classic American diner nestled on a bustling street in downtown Olympia, Washington, was a relic of a bygone era with its red vinyl booths, a long formica countertop, and a jukebox that stubbornly played hits from the 70s. Its charm was in its predictability, its worn edges a testament to the countless lives that had passed through seeking comfort in a hot meal and a moment's respite. Sarah, 28, and with eyes that held a universe of weary kindness, navigated the narrow aisles with an ingrained grace. Her auburn ponytail swished behind her, a metronome marking the rhythm of the breakfast rush. She balanced 3 plates on one arm, a stack of pancakes drowning in syrup for table 5, a heart-stopper omelette for the trucker in booth 2, and a side of rye toast burnt just so for old Mr. Henderson, who claimed it was the only way to eat it. "Morning, Sarah." "You're a lifesaver," grunted the trucker, not looking up from his phone. "Enjoy Frank?" She smiled, the expression genuine, despite the ache in her feet that had started the moment she'd clocked in at 6 a.m. Her own dreams felt as faded as the checkered linoleum floor. Dreams of art school, of painting vibrant canvases instead of delivering them laden with grease. But life, as it often does, had thrown a series of curveballs. Her mother's mounting medical bills, her own student loans from a community college course she never finished, and the ever-increasing rent for her tiny studio apartment had painted her into a corner of perpetual financial worry. The diner was a cacophony of sounds, the clatter of cutlery, the hiss of the griddle, the low hum of conversations, and Brenda, the head waitress, and Rosie's niece barking orders from behind the counter. Brenda, a woman whose personality seemed permanently set to scowl, had a voice that could curdle milk. Sarah. "Pick up table 7, and try not to spill the lavazza. This time, we ain't made of money." Sarah bit back a retort. Brenda's barbs were a daily special. She grabbed the carafe of steaming lavazza coffee, its rich scent, a small fleeting pleasure in her morning. Table 7 was a young couple engrossed in their phones, barely acknowledging her presence as she refilled their mugs. "Anything else for you folks?" she asked, her voice cheerful. A distracted shake of the head was their only reply. As the morning rush subsided into the mid-morning lull, Sarah found a moment to lean against the cool stainless steel counter, her gaze drifting to the street outside. Olympia wasn't a metropolis, but it had its share of stories, its share of hustle. She watched a young mother struggle with a stroller, a businessman rush past, talking animatedly into his AirPods, a street musician tuning his guitar. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere to have a purpose. Sometimes, Sarah felt like she was just treading water. Her tips from the breakfast shift were meager. A couple of dollars here, a $5 there, if she was lucky. Barely enough to cover her bus fare and a sandwich for lunch. She mentally calculated her expenses for the week. The rent was due on Friday. Mrs. Henderson, her landlady, a woman with a heart of gold, but a ledger of iron, had already given her one extension. Desperation, a familiar cold knot tightened in her stomach. Daydreaming again. Sarah Brenda's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. Wipe down the pie display and make it shine. My Aunt Rosie likes things just so. Sarah pushed herself off the counter with a sigh. Aunt Rosie, the original owner, had passed away 2 years ago, but Brenda invoked her name like a saint, mostly to justify her own nitpicking. Sarah grabbed a cloth and a bottle of Windex, the scent of ammonia momentarily overpowering the coffee and bacon. As she polished the glass, her reflection stared back, a tired young woman with shadows under her eyes, but a spark of defiance still flickering within. She wouldn't let life grind her down. She couldn't. He wasn't just different. He was a stark contrast to the usual Rosie's clientele. He was old, perhaps in his late 60s or early 70s, with a cascade of untamed silver-grey hair that fell to his shoulders and a beard that looked like it hadn't seen a trimmer in months. His clothes were ragged layers of what seemed to be threadbare shirts and a tattered overcoat that was far too heavy for the mild spring weather. His shoes were scuffed a hole visible in the toe of one, revealing a sockless foot. He carried no bag, no possessions, just an air of profound weariness that seemed to settle around him like dust. He hesitated at the entrance, his eyes, though somewhat clouded, scanning the diner with a mixture of uncertainty and something Sarah couldn't quite place. Apprehension, perhaps, or was it a flicker of old pain? The few remaining customers, a group of office workers lingering over coffee and a couple sharing a late breakfast, paused their conversations. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the diner. "What's he want?" Brenda muttered from behind the counter, her lips curled in distaste. "Probably looking for a handout. Tell him we're not a charity, Sarah." Sarah felt a familiar tug of empathy. She'd seen hardship up close and personal. She knew the sting of judgment, the shame of needing help. Ignoring Brenda's callous remark, she approached the man with a gentle smile. "Welcome to Rosie's," she said softly. "Table for one." The man flinched slightly at her direct address, as if unaccustomed to being spoken to with such normalcy. He looked at her, his gaze surprisingly sharp for a moment, before it clouded over again. He nodded slowly, his throat working as if he were trying to summon words. "Just a coffee. Please." He rasped, his voice hoarse and quiet. "Of course. Right this way." Sarah led him to a small, out-of-the-way booth in the corner, one that offered a modicum of privacy. She sensed his discomfort under the curious stares of the other patrons. She wanted to shield him from their judgment. As he shuffled towards the booth, she noticed the faint, earthy smell that clung to him, the smell of someone who had been sleeping rough. He sank into the vinyl seat with a deep, shuddering sigh, as if the simple act of sitting was an immense effort. Sarah placed a menu in front of him, though he hadn't asked for one. "Our coffee's pretty good," she said, trying to sound encouraging. "We have Lavazza, or just the regular house blend. Both are fresh. House blend is..." "Fine," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the tabletop, tracing the worn pattern with a dirt-stained finger. Sarah went to fetch his coffee, keenly aware of Brenda's hawk-like gaze following her every move. "Don't tell me you're actually going to serve him," Brenda hissed, as Sarah passed the counter. "He probably can't even pay for the coffee. And he smells. Everyone deserves a cup of coffee, Brenda." Sarah replied, keeping her voice even, and a little dignity. She poured the hot, dark liquid into a thick ceramic mug, the steam rising in a comforting plume. She added a couple of creamers and sugar packets to the saucer just in case. When she returned to the booth, the man was staring out the window, his expression unreadable. He seemed lost in a world of his own, a world far removed from the cheerful clatter of Rosie's diner. "Here you are," Sarah said, placing the coffee gently before him. "Can I get you anything else? Some toast, perhaps, or a muffin?" She knew he'd probably say no, but she had to offer. He looked up, his eyes briefly meeting hers. There was a depth to them, a flicker of intelligence, and a profound sadness that touched Sarah to her core. "No. Thank you. This is more than enough." He wrapped his gnarled hands around the warm mug as if drawing life from its heat. Sarah gave him a small nod. "Take your time. Let me know if you need anything." She retreated, busying herself with wiping down already clean tables, refilling salt and pepper shakers, anything to appear occupied while still keeping a discreet eye on her lone customer in the corner. She saw how slowly he sipped his coffee, savoring each mouthful as if it were the finest wine. He didn't look at anyone, didn't make a sound. He was an island of silent sorrow in the bustling diner. The office workers eventually left, their laughter echoing briefly before the door swung shut. The couple in the booth paid their bill, leaving a measly $1 tip for Sarah, and departed hand in hand. Soon only Sarah, Brenda, and the old man remained. The lunchtime rush wouldn't start for another hour. Brenda, never one for subtlety, finally marched over to the man's booth. Sarah tensed, expecting an ugly confrontation. "All right, old-timer," Brenda said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You done with that coffee, 'cause this ain't a library. Pay up or move along." The man looked up at Brenda, his face impassive. He reached slowly into his pocket, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sarah watched, her heart sinking. She knew with a sickening certainty what was about to happen. His hand emerged empty. He fumbled in another pocket, then another, a flush creeping up his weathered neck. I seem to have misplaced my wallet," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. His eyes darted towards Sarah, filled with a mixture of shame and panic. Brenda snorted a harsh, ugly sound. "Misplaced it. More like never had it. I knew it. Another freeloader. Well, you're not getting away with it. That coffee is $2.50. You pay or I'm calling the cops." Sarah's stomach twisted. Calling the police over a $2.50 cup of coffee. It was cruel, unnecessary. She looked at the man, at his frayed dignity, and saw a reflection of every time she had felt small, helpless, and judged. Her nonna's words echoed in her mind. "Un piccolo atto di gentilezza può illuminare un cuore oscuro." A small act of kindness can illuminate a dark heart. "Brenda, wait," Sarah interjected, stepping forward. Her voice was calm but firm. Brenda whirled around. Her eyes narrowed. "Stay out of this, Sarah. This is diner policy. No pay, no service. And if they've already had the service, they pay, or we involve the authorities. Simple. He just misplaced his wallet," Sarah insisted, trying to shield the man from Brenda's verbal assault. "It happens. I'll cover it." Brenda's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You'll cover it? On what, your lavish tips?" "Don't be ridiculous." "Sarah, it's the principle of the thing. The principle is that he's a human being who needed a cup of coffee." Sarah retorted, her own financial anxieties momentarily forgotten, eclipsed by a surge of protective indignation. She reached into her apron pocket, her fingers fumbling for the few crumpled bills she'd earned that morning. Her entire tip collection amounted to a grand total of $12 and change. Not enough for her bus pass renewal, let alone a significant dent in her overdue rent. Covering his coffee would mean sacrificing her own meager lunch. The old man was watching her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning gratitude. His lips trembled slightly. "No, miss, please," he whispered, his voice raspy. "You mustn't. I will find a way." "It's just coffee," Sarah said, offering him a reassuring smile, though her heart ached at the sight of his distress. She pulled out 3 $1 bills and held them out to Brenda. "Here, $2.50 for the coffee, and keep the change for your trouble." Brenda snatched the money, her face a mask of contempt. "Fine. But don't make a habit of this, Sarah. Rosie's isn't a soup kitchen for every stray that wanders in." She shot one last glare at the old man before turning on her heel and stomping back to the counter, muttering about bleeding hearts and the downfall of society. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The tension in the diner eased, but a residue of shame and discomfort lingered. She turned back to the old man. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. He looked up at her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know how to thank you, young lady. You have a good heart. A very good heart." He fumbled in his pocket again, and this time he pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, no bigger than her thumb. It was worn smooth with age, the dark wood gleaming softly. It was surprisingly beautiful, detailed with tiny, delicate feathers. "This isn't much," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but it's all I have to offer. Please take it, as a token of my gratitude." He pressed the small bird into her palm. His hand was cold, but his grip was surprisingly firm. Sarah looked at the tiny bird. It felt warm from his touch. It was a simple thing, yet it felt precious. "I can't accept this," she said softly. "You don't owe me anything." "Please," he insisted, his eyes pleading. "It would mean a great deal to me if you did. It was my wife's. She loved birds." A shadow of deep sorrow passed over his face. "She would have liked you." Sarah's heart clenched. The thought of this man alone and grieving, carrying this small memento of a lost love, was almost too much to bear. To refuse it now felt like a cruelty she couldn't inflict. "All right," she conceded, closing her fingers around the wooden bird. "Thank you. It's beautiful." She slipped it into her apron pocket, where it rested against her own meager earnings. "Would you like another cup of coffee?" "On the house this time. And maybe something to eat. A muffin or a slice of pie." "We have apple pie today, fresh from the oven." A faint smile touched the corners of his lips. "You are too kind, child. But no, I must be going. I've taken up enough of your time and your generosity." He slowly, painfully began to rise from the booth. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, a genuine concern in her voice. "Where will you go?" He paused, his gaze distant. "I have arrangements." He didn't elaborate. He simply nodded at her, a gesture of profound respect. "Thank you again. May your kindness be repaid 1,000-fold." And with that, he turned and shuffled slowly towards the diner door. He didn't look back. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped out into the indifferent sunshine, disappearing into the flow of pedestrians. Sarah watched him go, a strange mix of sadness and warmth settling in her chest. She felt the small wooden bird in her pocket. A token from a stranger, a reminder that even in the depths of poverty and despair, beauty and gratitude could still exist. Brenda, of course, had to have the last word. "Well, I hope you're happy, Florence Nightingale. You just threw away good money. And for what? Some sentimental claptrap from a smelly old bum." Sarah didn't reply. She simply touched the pocket where the bird lay. Somehow she didn't feel like she had thrown anything away. In fact, in a strange way, she felt richer. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders, demanding customers and Brenda's ceaseless complaints. Sarah ate a dry cracker from the staff room for lunch, her stomach rumbling, but her spirit felt oddly lighter. As she counted her meager tips at the end of the day, now reduced by the $2.50 she'd spent plus the invisible cost of the muffin she'd almost given away, the familiar anxiety about her rent resurfaced. But mixed with it was a quiet sense of rightness. She had done a good thing. That had to count for something, didn't it? She arrived at Rosie's diner a few minutes before her 6 a.m. shift. The familiar smells of brewing coffee and warming griddles already permeating the air. Frank, the cook, a burly man with a surprisingly gentle demeanor, was whistling off-key as he cracked eggs onto the hot surface. Morning sunshine, he greeted her, his usual moniker for her, delivered with a wink. "Heard you were playing Lady Bountiful yesterday." Sarah blushed slightly. News especially, gossip travelled fast in the close-knit ecosystem of Rosie's. "Just helping someone out, Frank?" "Yeah, well, Brenda's still spitting feathers about it. Says you're going to bankrupt the place with your charity cases." He flipped a pancake with practiced ease. "Don't mind her. You did a good thing." Sarah offered a grateful smile. Frank's quiet approval meant more to her than Brenda's predictable negativity. She tied on her apron, the small wooden bird safely tucked into its pocket. It felt like a talisman now, a secret source of strength. As she was setting out the sugar caddies and napkin dispensers, Brenda swept in her face set in its customary, disapproving lines. "About time you got here, Sarah. There's a situation outside." Situation. What kind of situation? Sarah asked, her mind immediately jumping to a delivery truck blocking the alley, or perhaps another stray animal needing rescue. "Just go look." Brenda snapped a strange expression on her face, a mixture of annoyance and something akin to awe. "It's blocking half the sidewalk, and it's drawing a crowd." Curious. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and headed to the front door. She pushed it open and stepped outside, expecting to see... she didn't know what. And then she saw it. It was a car. But car seemed an almost offensively inadequate word. Gleaming under the dull morning light, parked directly in front of Rosie's diner, was a Bentley. A brand new, impossibly sleek, opulently black Bentley Mulsanne. It shone with a depth of polish that seemed to absorb the grey light and reflect it back with an inner fire. Its chrome grille glittered like a king's ransom. It was the kind of vehicle Sarah had only ever seen in movies or the pages of glossy magazines, a symbol of unimaginable wealth and power. It looked utterly fantastically out of place in front of the faded facade of Rosie's. A small crowd of early morning commuters and curious onlookers had indeed gathered, pointing and whispering. Their faces reflected a mixture of admiration, envy, and sheer disbelief. Sarah herself just stood there, mouth slightly agape, trying to process the incongruous sight. Whose is that?" she stammered, turning to Brenda, who had followed her out. Arms crossed, a scowl firmly in place, though her eyes kept darting towards the magnificent machine. "How should I know?" Brenda sniffed. "Probably some lost millionaire. or a gangster. Honestly, the nerve of some people parking a monstrosity like that right in front of a respectable establishment. It's probably violating half a dozen parking ordinances. Despite her words, Sarah could detect a grudging fascination in Brenda's tone. Frank had joined them, wiping his greasy hands on his apron, his eyes wide. "Sweet mother of pearl," he breathed. "Now that's what I call a ride. Bet it costs more than this whole diner land included." Sarah slowly approached the Bentley, an inexplicable feeling drawing her closer. It was so perfectly crafted, so silent, so potent. It felt like a creature from another world. As she got nearer, she noticed a uniformed chauffeur standing ramrod straight beside the driver's door. He was an imposing figure, tall and stern-faced, with mirrored sunglasses that reflected her own astonished face. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a spy movie. The chauffeur's head turned slightly as Sarah approached. He didn't smile, didn't react, just watched her with an unnerving stillness. "Excuse me." Sarah began feeling incredibly small and out of her depth. Are you waiting for someone?" From the diner. She couldn't imagine any of Rosie's regulars being associated with such extravagance. The chauffeur's expression remained impassive. Then, with a deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness, he reached into the inner pocket of his perfectly tailored jacket and produced a thick, cream-colored envelope. He held it out to her. Sarah stared at the envelope. It was made of expensive, heavy cardstock, and her name, Miss Sarah Jenkins, was written on the front in elegant, flowing calligraphy. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against her ribs. How did he know her name? What was going on? She looked from the envelope to the chauffeur's inscrutable face, then back to the unbelievable car. This couldn't be happening. It felt like a dream, a bizarre, vivid hallucination. "This is for me," she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. The chauffeur inclined his head a fraction of an inch. "Miss Tora Jenkins?" He confirmed his voice, deep and resonant, with a slight British accent. Yes, that's me." He extended the envelope further. Hesitantly, Sarah reached out and took it. The cardstock felt cool and smooth beneath her trembling fingers. "What is this?" she asked, her mind reeling. "My instructions were to deliver this to you personally, miss." Jenkins, the chauffeur, stated, his tone polite but firm, offering no further information. "And to wait for your response, should one be required." Wait for her response. Response to what? With trembling hands, Sarah turned the envelope over. It was sealed with a wax crest, an elaborate design she didn't recognize, a stylized letter C, intertwined with what looked like a heraldic lion. A sense of profound unreality washed over her. This was too much, too strange. Brenda and Frank were watching her with wide, unblinking eyes. Even the small crowd of onlookers seemed to be holding its breath. The entire street felt silent, all attention focused on her and the mysterious envelope. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Her fingers fumbled with the seal, finally breaking it open. Inside, nestled against the creamy lining, was a single folded sheet of matching cardstock. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the elegant typewritten lines. The words leaped out at her, stark and unbelievable against the expensive paper. "Dear Ms. Jenkins, your act of kindness yesterday towards a man in need did not go unnoticed. Such compassion is a rare and precious commodity in this world. The man you helped is under my care. As a token of his and my own profound gratitude, I would like to extend an invitation. Please be ready at 3:00 p.m. this afternoon. My chauffeur, Mr. Harrison, who delivered this note, will return to collect you. There is someone who very much wishes to thank you personally. Do not concern yourself with your work commitments. They will be taken care of. Consider this an opportunity that may redefine your understanding of consequence and reward. Yours sincerely, Alistair Cromwell. Sarah read the note once then, twice then, a third time. Her mind struggled to comprehend the words. Alistair Cromwell. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like someone she might have read about in the business pages of a newspaper discarded on a bus seat. A name associated with immense wealth, philanthropy, and an almost mythical reclusiveness. Alistair Cromwell. She whispered the name, feeling alien on her tongue. The man she helped was under his care. A token of gratitude, a chauffeur, a Bentley. The name Alistair Cromwell reverberated in Sarah's mind like a struck gong. She'd heard it before, whispered in hushed, reverent tones on financial news segments she'd occasionally glimpsed on the small TV in the diner's break room. Cromwell, a titan of industry, a shadowy figure who controlled a vast, labyrinthine emma of corporations rumored to be one of the wealthiest and most reclusive men in the world. His photograph was rarely seen. His public appearances were non-existent. He was more myth than man, and somehow this mythical billionaire was connected to the disheveled, penniless old man she had helped yesterday, the man whose simple coffee she had paid for. "What is it, Sarah? You look like you've seen a ghost." Frank pressed his brow furrowed with concern. Brenda for once was silent, her usual cynicism momentarily overshadowed by sheer unadulterated curiosity. She craned her neck, trying to get a glimpse of the note. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. It's an invitation from Alistair Cromwell." Frank's eyes widened comically. "The Alistair Cromwell? The zillionaire?" "You're kidding me, right?" Brenda scoffed, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Alistair Cromwell. What would he want with her? The unspoken, a lowly waitress, hung heavy in the air. Sarah ignored Brenda. Her gaze was fixed on Mr. Harrison, the chauffeur who stood like a statue, patiently awaiting her response. "The man I helped yesterday, the elderly gentleman. Is he Alistair Cromwell?" The idea was preposterous. The man in rags, the man who couldn't afford a cup of coffee, being one of the richest men on the planet. It was the stuff of outlandish fairy tales. Mr. Harrison's expression remained unreadable behind his sunglasses. "Mr. Cromwell is a man of particular methods, Miss Jenkins. He has his reasons for all that he does. The gentleman you assisted is indeed a very close associate of Mr. Cromwell, and Mr. Cromwell was made aware of your exceptional kindness." A close associate. Not Cromwell himself, then. That made slightly more sense, though the situation was still surreal. But why the secrecy? Why the elaborate setup? "He wants to meet me," Sarah asked, still trying to process the information. "This afternoon." At 3, she thought of her shift. She was scheduled to work until 5 p.m. "But my job. As the note states, Miss Jenkins, your work commitments will be taken care of," Mr. Harrison said smoothly. He produced another much smaller envelope from his pocket and handed it to Brenda, who had edged closer. "This should compensate Rosie's diner for any inconvenience caused by Miss Jenkins's absence." Brenda's eyes nearly popped out of her head as she peeked inside the envelope. Sarah caught a glimpse of crisp, high-denomination bills, enough to cover Sarah's wages for a week, maybe more. Brenda's jaw, which was usually set in a firm line of disapproval, actually dropped. She looked from the money to Sarah, then to the Bentley, a new, almost fearful respect dawning in her eyes. "Well, I suppose an afternoon off wouldn't be—" "Out of the question," Brenda stammered, suddenly obsequious. The power of wealth, Sarah thought grimly, could even tame Brenda's shrewish tongue. Sarah felt a wave of dizziness. This was all happening too fast. 1 minute she was worrying about her rent, the next she was being summoned by a billionaire. Her shift bought out by a chauffeur with an impeccable British accent. It was like being swept into a tornado. Do I have a choice?" Sarah asked Mr. Harrison, though she suspected she already knew the answer. People like Alistair Cromwell didn't make polite suggestions. They issued summonses. Mr. Cromwell would be most disappointed if you were to decline, Ms. Jenkins. The chauffeur replied, his tone still polite, but with an underlying current of steel. He is very keen to express his gratitude personally. Gratitude. It seemed an overwhelming response to such a small gesture. What was truly going on here? A part of her, the sensible, cautious part, screamed that this was too strange, too good to be true. There had to be a catch, a hidden agenda. People like Alistair Cromwell didn't operate on simple gratitude. They moved in a world of power plays, of calculated moves and counter-moves. Was she a pawn in some game she didn't understand? But another part of her, the part that still clung to dreams, the part that had felt a connection to the old man and his little wooden bird, was undeniably intrigued, and perhaps just a little bit excited. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to waitresses in Olympia, Washington. She thought of the wooden bird in her pocket. May your kindness be repaid 1,000-fold. Had the old man known? Was he in on this charade? Okay, Sarah said, her voice firmer than she felt. Okay, I'll meet him. 3 o'clock. A ghost of a smile touched Mr. Harrison's lips. Excellent, Ms. Jenkins. I shall return for you at precisely 3:00 p.m. Please be ready. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turned with military precision, opened the Bentley's door, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, a low, powerful thrum that vibrated through the pavement, with a smoothness that defied its size. The magnificent car pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street, leaving behind a stunned silence and the lingering scent of expensive leather and exhaust. The moment the Bentley was out of sight, the spell was broken. Brenda and Frank erupted. I don't believe it, Alistair Cromwell, Frank exclaimed, shaking his head in amazement. What in tarnation did that old fella say to him about you? Brenda, having recovered her composure, was now eyeing Sarah with a calculating look. Well, Sarah, it seems you've landed on your feet. Don't forget who gave you the afternoon off when you're hobnobbing with millionaires. Her tone had shifted from derision to a kind of grasping sycophancy. Sarah barely heard them. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions and anxieties. What should she wear? Her wardrobe consisted of jeans, t-shirts, and her Rosie's diner uniform. She certainly didn't own anything suitable for a meeting with a billionaire. Where were they going? What would he say? And most importantly, why her? The hours leading up to 3 p.m. crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah went through the motions of her shortened shift. her hands trembling so much she almost dropped a tray of coffee cups. Every customer who came in seemed to be looking at her differently, whispering amongst themselves. News of the Bentley and the mysterious note had spread like wildfire. She felt like an exhibit in a zoo. At 2:30 p.m., Brenda, in an uncharacteristic display of what might have been perceived as kindness, or perhaps an investment in future favors, told Sarah to go home and get ready. "You can't meet a billionaire looking like you've been slinging hash all day," she'd said, not unkindly for once. Sarah rushed back to her tiny apartment, her heart pounding. She showered quickly, then stood staring despairingly at her meager selection of clothes. In the end, she chose her newest pair of dark blue jeans, a simple clean white blouse, and the least scuffed pair of ballet flats she owned. She brushed her auburn hair until it shone, tied it back in a neat ponytail, and applied a touch of mascara and lip gloss, her usual dressed-up look. It would have to do. She wasn't going to pretend to be someone she wasn't. As she was about to leave, her eyes fell on the small wooden bird on her nightstand. On impulse, she picked it up and slipped it into her jeans pocket. It felt grounding, a tangible link to the event that had set this incredible, terrifying day in motion. At precisely 2:58 p.m., she was standing outside her apartment building, her bag clutched in her hand, her nerves frayed, and at precisely 300 p.m., the gleaming black Bentley Mulsanne glided to a silent stop at the curb in front of her. It was like watching a scene from a movie, only she was in it. Mr. Harrison emerged, opened the rear passenger door with a flourish, and inclined his head. "Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Cromwell awaits." Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped towards the car. The interior was even more opulent than she could have imagined. Plush cream leather seats, polished dark wood paneling, discreet chrome accents. It smelled of wealth, of a life so far removed from her own. It felt like stepping onto another planet. The journey in the Bentley was a silent, surreal glide through the streets of Olympia, and then onto a highway Sarah didn't recognize. Mr. Harrison navigated the roads with quiet efficiency, the city giving way to lush, forested countryside. Sarah sat bolt upright, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the small wooden bird a reassuring pressure in her pocket. She tried to make small talk, once asking where they were headed, but Mr. Harrison merely offered a polite, "Not much further, Ms. Jenkins," effectively discouraging further conversation. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably no more than 40 minutes, the Bentley turned off the main road and onto a private unmarked lane shaded by a canopy of towering Douglas firs. The lane wound upwards, growing steeper, until finally they broke through the trees, and Sarah gasped. Before her, perched on a bluff overlooking a breathtaking panorama of Puget Sound and the distant Olympic Mountains, was an estate unlike anything she had ever seen. It wasn't a flamboyant mansion, but rather a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines, glass and natural stone, designed to blend seamlessly with its stunning natural surroundings. It spoke not of ostentatious wealth, but of refined taste and an immense quiet power. This was Alistair Cromwell's domain. The Bentley purred to a stop before a large, unassuming entrance. Mr. Harrison opened her door. "Mr. Cromwell will see you in his study, Ms. Jenkins. Please follow me." Sarah's legs felt like jelly as she stepped out of the car. The air here was crisp and cool, smelling of pine and sea salt. She followed Mr. Harrison through massive wooden doors that opened silently into a minimalist foyer, adorned with a single stunning piece of abstract sculpture. The interior was vast, yet strangely intimate, filled with art that looked like it belonged in a museum. Every detail, from the grain of the wooden floors to the subtle lighting, whispered of unimaginable expense and meticulous curation. They walked down a long, silent corridor, their footsteps echoing faintly. Finally, Mr. Harrison paused before a pair of tall, dark wood doors. He knocked softly. A voice from within, cultured and surprisingly gentle, responded, "Come in, Mr. Posutundu." Harrison opened one of the doors and gestured for Sarah to enter. "Miss Sarah Jenkins, sir." Sarah stepped into the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The study was enormous, lined from floor to ceiling with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. One entire wall was a vast window, offering the same spectacular view of the sound she had seen outside. A large, imposing desk made of a dark, polished wood that looked like ebony sat facing the window, but the chair behind it was turned away, its occupant hidden from view. The room smelled of old books, beeswax, and the faint aromatic scent of Earl Grey tea. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the large leather chair slowly swiveled around. And then Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Next to Alistair Cromwell's desk, standing quietly and observing her with a gentle, knowing gaze, was the old man from Rosie's diner. He was no longer in tattered rags. He was clean-shaven, his silver hair neatly combed. He wore a simple but well-fitting suit, and his eyes, now clear and bright, held a spark of amusement and something else. Relief. Sarah stared dumbfounded from Alistair Cromwell to the old man and back again. "But I don't understand," she stammered. You were—" Alistair Cromwell chuckled a soft, dry sound. "Forgive the theatrics, Miss Jenkins. Allow me to introduce my very dear friend, and for many years my most trusted adviser, Mr. Arthur Pendleton." The old man, Arthur Pendleton, inclined his head, a shy smile playing on his lips. "A pleasure to formally meet you, Miss Jenkins, though I must say our previous encounter was far more enlightening." Sarah's mind reeled. The man she had helped, the man who had given her, the wooden bird, was not just some anonymous vagrant. He was a close associate of one of the wealthiest men in the world. The disguise, the act of poverty, it had all been a test she asked the word tasting bitter on her tongue. She felt a flush of embarrassment, then a prickle of anger. Had she been played for a fool, Alistair Cromwell seemed to read her thoughts. His smile softened with understanding. "Not a test of you in a cruel sense, Miss Jenkins, but rather a test of human nature. Arthur, you see, has become somewhat disillusioned with the world, and frankly so have I at times." He gestured to a comfortable armchair opposite his desk. "Please sit. Would you care for some tea?" Sarah was too stunned to do anything but comply, sinking into the plush leather. "No, thank you," she managed. Arthur shook his head. "No. I had ample funds. I simply wanted to see what would happen. And what happened was, you, Miss Jenkins, you treated me with respect when others looked away. You defended me. And you paid for my coffee a sum I suspect you could ill afford, without a moment's hesitation for your own hardship." "The wooden bird," Sarah said, reaching into her pocket and pulling it out. "Your wife's—" Arthur's eyes softened. "Eleanor carved those. She loved birds, as I mentioned. I carry that one with me always. Giving it to you was an impulsive gesture, but a sincere one. I wanted you to have something that truly mattered to me, because your kindness truly mattered to me. It was like a flare in a very dark night." Alistair Cromwell leaned forward, his blue eyes surprisingly intense. "Ms. Jenkins Arthur returned here yesterday afternoon, profoundly moved. He told me about your actions. In a world where I am constantly surrounded by people who want something from me, your selfless act expecting nothing in return resonated deeply. It restored a measure of my own faith in humanity." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Which brings us to why you are here." Sarah held her breath. This was it. The reason for the Bentley, the note, the summons to this opulent fortress. "I am an old man, Ms. Jenkins." Cromwell continued, a wistful note in his voice. "I have amassed a fortune beyond comprehension, more money than I could spend in a dozen lifetimes. But wealth, I have found, can be a gilded cage. It isolates. It corrupts. I have no children, no direct heirs to carry on my legacy in a way that aligns with the values I've belatedly come to cherish." He looked at her directly, his gaze unwavering. "I have been searching for a very long time for someone with integrity, with compassion, with a genuine desire to make a positive impact on the world. Someone who understands the value of kindness, not as a transaction, but as a fundamental human decency." Arthur's experiment, as unconventional as it was, inadvertently led me to you. Sarah's heart was pounding so loudly, she was sure they could hear it. What was he about to say? "Ms. Jenkins." Alistair Cromwell said, his voice clear and deliberate. "I am proposing to establish a charitable foundation, a foundation with initial seed capital of $100 million. Sarah gasped. $100 million. The sum was so vast, so astronomical, it barely registered as real. "This foundation," Cromwell continued, "will be dedicated to alleviating poverty, supporting education for underprivileged youth, and fostering community-based initiatives that promote kindness and compassion, the very qualities you demonstrated so admirably." He leaned back in his chair, a hopeful expression on his face. "And I would like you, Ms. Sarah Jenkins, to head this foundation, to be its director, its guiding spirit. You would have full autonomy over its operations, its disbursements, its direction. You would be given all the resources, all the support you need. A very generous salary, of course, and a new home if you wish it here on the estate, or wherever you choose. You would have the power to change countless lives for the better." Sarah stared at him speechless. Her mind was a blank canvas wiped clean by the sheer audacity of his proposal. Head $100 million foundation. Her a waitress from Rosie's Diner who could barely make her rent. It was insane. It was impossible. But why me? She finally managed her voice, a choked whisper. "I have no experience, no qualifications. I'm just ordinary." Alistair Cromwell smiled, a genuine fatherly smile. "Ah, but you see, Ms. Jenkins, your ordinariness, as you put it, is precisely your greatest qualification. You haven't been corrupted by wealth or power. Your compassion is innate, not learned from a textbook or a boardroom. You understand hardship. You understand the transformative power of a simple act of kindness. That, my dear, is rarer and more valuable than any MBA or a string of philanthropic credentials." Arthur Pendleton nodded in agreement. "We don't want a seasoned bureaucrat, Sarah. We want someone with heart, someone who will ensure this money truly reaches those who need it, guided by empathy, not by ego or ambition." Sarah looked from Cromwell to Arthur, her head spinning. This was a life-altering, world-shifting proposition. It was a chance to escape her own struggles. Yes, but more than that, it was a chance to make a real difference, to help people in a way she had only ever dreamed of. To live by her nonna's principles on a scale she could never have imagined. But the responsibility, it was terrifying. Could she do it? Was she capable of managing such a vast undertaking? The fear of failure, of letting them down, of not being good enough, warred with the incredible burgeoning hope that swelled in her chest. She thought of her tiny apartment, her endless bills, her faded dreams of art school. She thought of the tired faces of her colleagues at Rosie's, of the quiet desperation she saw in so many people every day. And she thought of the old man Arthur sitting in the diner, his eyes filled with shame and the simple act of kindness that had brought her here. Alistair Cromwell watched her, his expression patient, expectant. He wasn't pressuring her. He was offering her a gift, a monumental, terrifying, exhilarating gift. The acceptance hung in the air, a momentous chord struck in the quiet study. Alistair Cromwell's smile widened creases, deepening around his kind eyes. Arthur Pendleton let out a soft sigh of what sounded like profound satisfaction. For Sarah, the world seemed to tilt on its axis, then slowly, thrillingly right itself onto a completely new trajectory. "Excellent, Miss Jenkins." "Truly excellent," Cromwell said, his voice infused with a newfound energy. "I had a feeling about you, a very strong feeling. Arthur, it seems your rather unorthodox research has yielded the most remarkable results." Arthur chuckled. "Indeed, Alistair. Sometimes the most profound truths are found in the most unexpected of places, like a corner booth at Rosie's diner." It was late evening when Mr. Harrison finally drove Sarah back, not to her old apartment, but to the charming guest house on Alistair Cromwell's estate. It was even more beautiful than she'd imagined. A cozy, elegantly furnished cottage nestled among trees, with a stone patio offering a stunning view of the starlit Puget Sound. Her few belongings, Mr. Harrison informed her, had been discreetly collected from her old apartment earlier that day, and were already waiting for her inside. He handed her a set of keys and a new high-end smartphone. "Mr. Cromwell thought this might be more suitable for your new role. Ms. Jenkins," he said. "It's pre-programmed with all relevant contact numbers. My own is there should you require anything at all, day or night." Standing alone in the beautifully appointed living room, with its crackling fireplace and shelves filled with interesting books, Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and an exhilarating sense of purpose. She walked over to the window, looking out at the shimmering water. Just 24 hours ago, she had been a tired waitress, worrying about a $2.50 coffee. Now she was on the cusp of a new life, one with the potential to touch thousands of others. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden bird. She placed it on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, a prominent position in her new home. It would serve as a constant reminder, a reminder of where she came from, of the transformative power of a single act of kindness, and of the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple choice in Rosie's diner. The following weeks were a whirlwind. True to his word, Alistair Cromwell's team moved with astonishing speed. The Eleanor Foundation was officially incorporated. An office sleek and modern was established in a prestigious Seattle skyscraper. A small dedicated team was assembled to support Sarah. A sharp, empathetic lawyer named Maria, a financial wizard called David, and a warm, incredibly organized assistant named Ben. Rosie's diner, meanwhile, underwent a quiet transformation. News spread of a mysterious angel investor who had provided funds for a complete renovation, new kitchen equipment, and generous bonuses for all the staff. Brenda, bewildered but overjoyed, oversaw the upgrades. Frank was able to afford better care for his daughter. The diner, once tired and struggling, was revitalized, its future secured, all thanks to an act of kindness that had come full circle. Sarah visited one afternoon incognito, sipping a Lavazza coffee at the counter, a quiet smile on her face as she watched the happy, bustling scene. Brenda, spotting her, rushed over. "Sarah. My goodness, you look different, prosperous," Brenda exclaimed, her voice softer, her eyes holding a new respect. "Heard you landed on your feet. We all miss you, you know. Things are a lot better around here, thanks to some miracle." Sarah just smiled. "I'm glad to hear that, Brenda. Everyone deserves a little miracle now and then." As the months turned into years, the Eleanor Foundation, under Sarah Jenkins' leadership, became a significant force for good. Guided by her compassionate vision and Alistair Cromwell's unwavering support, Arthur Pendleton served as a wise, gentle presence on the board. The foundation funded hundreds of projects, big and small, across the country, and eventually internationally. They built schools in impoverished communities, provided clean water to remote villages, funded scholarships for brilliant but needy students, supported artists from marginalized backgrounds, a cause close to Sarah's own heart, and championed countless initiatives that fostered kindness and built stronger communities. Sarah never lost her humility, her connection to her roots. She never forgot the feel of an empty pocket or the sting of desperation. She made sure the foundation remained grounded, accessible and responsive to the real needs of the people it served. She became a respected figure in the philanthropic world, not for her access to Cromwell's billions, but for her integrity, her passion, and her genuine commitment to making the world a slightly better, kinder place. Alistair Cromwell, in his twilight years, found a renewed sense of purpose watching Sarah and the foundation flourish. He had sought a legacy, and in Sarah he had found not just an heir to his philanthropic ambitions, but a kindred spirit who embodied the values he had come to admire above all else. He often told Arthur that Sarah was the best investment he had ever made. Sometimes, late at night in her beautiful guest house overlooking the Sound, Sarah would hold the small wooden bird, its surface worn even smoother now by her own touch. It was a tangible link to a single, ordinary Tuesday that had become the most extraordinary day of her life. A reminder that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or Bentleys, but in the richness of the human heart and the incredible, far-reaching ripples of a single, selfless act of kindness. The waitress who had covered a poor man's bill had in turn received the opportunity to help cover the needs of a world hungry for compassion, and she had seized it with both hands, her heart full of gratitude and an unwavering belief in the enduring power of good. And so Sarah's story unfolds, a testament to how one small, unassuming act of kindness can trigger an avalanche of positive change, transforming not just one life, but countless others. From the worn linoleum floors of Rosie's diner to the global stage of philanthropy, her journey reminds us that compassion is the most valuable currency we possess. What did you think of Sarah's incredible story? Did any part of it resonate with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you or warmed your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a little reminder of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting and dramatic stories like this one. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, remember, a little kindness goes a long way.